So just a little bit of an introduction. My name's Helen Clitheroe, and I'm a former athlete who competed at the Steeplechase myself, and I'm currently looking after the Steeplechase as Steeplechase coordinator for England Athletics, which means that I help set up some workshops, which I've recognised quite a few names on the list of people who've attended the workshops. And also we've supported events such as the Birmingham Relays and the Steeplefest competitions. So also supporting a few competitions with the Steeplechase coordinator role. I was a 1500 metre runner, and women's steeplechase only came in halfway through my sort of running career. So I decided to give it a go. So I was 32 years old when I first took part in steeplechase. So had quite a different journey to quite a lot of the people who do the event. I ran 2 World Championships and an Olympic Games at steeplechase and have a PB of 9:29. So my experience as a steeplechaser is quite short, but hopefully I learnt quite a few things about the event during that time. Spencer Duval is also in the background, so he might be able to answer a few questions if I don't know the answer. I'm also coaching now. I coach Jermaine Coleman, who's one of our top steeplechasers in the senior event, and he's got a personal best of 8:30. So hopefully we can have a good chat between us. Great to see so many familiar names, and if anybody has any questions, you'll see the chat box at the bottom. You can put your questions in as we're going through the slides. I'm going to play a video clip. It's only quite short. And then we're going to go through some of the steeplechase coaching cues from the video and then answer questions about each slide, after each slide, if that works. Okay, so I'm just going to play the video.
Steeplechase. Demonstrates rhythm running efficiency over increased height and distance. Can take off fluidly from either leg. More forwards movement is seen rather than up at takeoff when clearing the barrier. The lead leg goes up and skims the top of the barrier. The trail leg moves laterally.
Okay, so short and sweet video. So I've just picked out a few of the cues that were on the video that were spoken about by on the graphics on the video. So rhythm running. What does this mean? This is something that's super important in the steeplechase. Obviously, we have to have the ability to keep in the same rhythm in approach to and running off the barrier. The biggest thing that I found when I did the steeplechase was I totally underestimated how much the rhythm breaks up during the race. So this is something that you have to practice. Keeping running form and barrier form over the longer distances. So not losing your form, not sort of collapsing as you come off the barrier, being able to be strong enough to jump over the barrier as many times as you have to, depending on which age group you're running in. Being able to deal with disturbances to the rhythm during a steeplechase. So by that, I mean other athletes. You can practice on your own so much, but when you're in a race and you're in a crowd of people, that's something that is really difficult to get your head around at first if you've not done the steeplechase before. So you really need to, even if you quite often steeplechasers, we train alone because we have to maybe put some hurdles out on the track and we don't always have many people to train with. So it's something for coaches to think about, is how can we simulate having other athletes around. And it might be that the coach themselves sort of runs into the barrier or the hurdle with the athlete just to give them something to put them off a little bit. Other things that could disturb your rhythm during the race, misjudging the barrier. this is quite easily done if somebody steps in your way, for example, the other athletes, or you just mistime your rhythm and mistime your stride or stutter into the barrier. And also having an ineffective water jump. So this is something that really does affect your rhythm during the race. What can we do to improve this? So working at race pace over barriers in hurdle, in training, and when you're fatigued. So just getting used to that feeling in your legs of that last 2 or 3 last 2k of the race or last k of the race, when you're really starting to feel the fatigue. Hurdling and grouping training, which I just spoke about. Hurdling after using something to simulate fatigue, such as some drills, some squats, some type of circuit work, and then going into hurdling can help give you that feeling of fatigue that you will get in a race. And I also think a very good strength and conditioning program will help you become more robust. The next 3 webinars that we're going to have for the steeplechase, we're going to go through a video that we made following a workshop with Trevor Painter, where we went through some strength and conditioning ideas that you could apply to your steeplechase athletes. So if that's something you're interested in, please join us for the next 3 webinars where we'll go through that video. So I think they're broken up into 15-minute videos, so we can talk about the different strength and conditioning ideas regarding that. So I'm going to open it up now to questions. So you can see them on the screen. So how many months of the year should a steeplechase train over barriers if possible? I think there's a good reason to have some sort of hurdle or barrier work, probably hurdle more than barriers, just for safety aspect. At some point throughout the year, the athlete needs to become, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the next slide actually, but athlete needs to become so confident and so used to running over the barriers and used that I think a lot of athletes are lacking confidence when it comes to steeplechase. So even if it was just a tiny little bit throughout the winter months and then more specific stuff going into the summer months, I think there is definitely a reason to include some sort of barrier work, whether it's drills, running over a few barriers after a tempo run, for example, and then maybe bringing in the more specific rep sessions as you come into the season. Everybody has different ideas on this, and if anybody does have any other ideas, please feel free to type them on, and we'll maybe get them up on the screen in a bit. Hope that answers your question, Paul. Thank you. Given as you're steadily getting tired as the race goes on, what mental training do you, as a boring endurance roadrunner, I have massive respect for steeplechasers. What cues can roadrunners take from the mental side? Thanks, Neil, for that question. I think in the steeplechase, actually, in terms of mental strength, you have quite a lot to focus on, unlike a road race where it might just be clipping off the miles or the kilometers as you go by. In the steeplechase, you've always got a barrier within a few more strides. So when I was running the steeplechase, each barrier would be the sort of thing I focused on as soon as I cleared one. So always looking to the next barrier, or not really worrying about, trying not to worry too much about what had gone behind, but looking at the next barrier and trying to get that and execute that in the best way that you can possibly do. So I think that's something that's very useful in the steeplechase. It's one of the advantages, actually. In terms of applying it to road running, mental strength, I would always sort of try and focus on a few different aspects of maybe your running style, and this applies to any discipline. Just try and have a few things that you think about that you can switch to switch your mind onto something. For example, you could look at your form, so it could be keeping tall, it could be if you're running uphill to drive your arms, etc., etc. And it would apply to steeplechase as well. So I would always try to keep my focus quite neutral going into a barrier, because I find it quite hard. So for example, I would count, so it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4 into the barrier and then just run off, and that would keep my mind from being negative about a barrier, because quite often I was an athlete, because I was quite old when I took it up, that I would stutter into the barrier, and I give myself a hard time about that. So that is something that I found really helped, was sort of attacking each barrier with a new focus as the race went on. I hope that answers your question, Neil. Thank you. We're looking at my facility that they're able to fill up the water pit. However, what are the options for water jump practice? I'm not a fan of sand pits. Other options? I agree, Paul. I'm also not a fan of sand pits, especially as myself, I tore some ligaments in my foot, like leading into the British Champs one year, practicing in a sand pit. So other options, quite good to jump onto the grass, as long as the grass isn't slippy. I think if you can get the water filled up, that is really good. But yeah, I would say just sort of still practicing stepping onto the barrier if that's what you do, and pushing off. You can also do this off another, you could do it off a box and just practice sort of pushing off the box rather than sort of having to land in a sandpit, because when you land in a sandpit, you're not got that ability to run out. And I think that's the thing we need to practice from the water jump, is running out of the water jump. And if we're landing in the sand all the time, we're going to get you have to probably rake it every single time for us not to have the risk of, making a hole and risk injury, where, and it's not as easy to run out. So practicing that running off, I think, can be done on a hard surface such as grass, which is a bit kinder than doing it on the track. If anybody else has got any tips on that, feel free to type them in. Thanks, Paul. Hi, Basha. How did you injure yourself in the sandpit in case others do similar? So yeah, I was practicing my barrier jump into the sandpit, and I just, I think probably didn't rake the sandpit as often as I should have, and just went over on my ankle quite badly and did my ligaments in. So that's just my experience. I'm sure other people, I know a lot of people train in the sandpit, and it is, and I did train a little bit in the sandpit at Loughborough on the indoor track, which was perhaps a little bit sort of nicer indoor sand, so it was a little bit easier to rake and to keep smooth compared to an outside sandpit. But yeah, that was just something that's my experience. So it has put me off a little bit. Thanks, Bash. What training sessions could you recommend for a steeplechase 2K and 3K? So the type of sessions that I would recommend is in terms of actually running over barriers. I'd be looking at either doing a session that, if you're trying to train within a group and you're one of the only steeplechasers, there's ways you can do that without coming away too far from your training group, and that could be sort of dipping in and out of the session. So for example, if you're doing a bunch of 400s, you could do one with the group on the flat and one on, in lane 2 or 3 over your barrier, and that would be a good way to sort of incorporate training with a group still. If you're training on your own, suggestions for sessions could be breaking up the race. So if you were doing a 2K and 3K, and almost doing sort of time trial type racing training, so just keeping that, seeing what you can do with a short recovery. Quite often a session that would do over 400 meters would be sort of cutting down the recovery. So starting off with, say we're doing 8 400s, starting off with quite long recovery, such as 90 seconds to 2 minutes, and each time bringing the recovery down. So we're finishing with a 30-second break between the reps. That is a really good way to simulate the feeling of fatigue when you're getting tired at the end of the race. There's loads of sessions. If we can come back to, if there's any topics tonight, such as talking about sessions, we could come back and do a whole webinar on that if you want. But I hope that gives you a couple of ideas, Lauren. Thanks. Any thoughts of using the water jump without water? Hi, Nori. No, it's not something I would recommend. I feel that with the water, it gives you a little bit of extra sort of cushioning almost. I don't know how true that is, but I just feel that it's not really a great idea to do it without the water. Hope that's just my thoughts on it. Don't know if anybody else has any ideas on that. Are there any specific injuries, not including hurdle accidents, that steeplechasers may get that can be helped by strength and conditioning? Obviously, yeah, we have quite a high incident of accidents in the steeplechase, such as hitting the barrier, landing badly off a hurdle. But I'd say probably the most common would be sort of lower limb injuries, such as ankle, Achilles problems. So definitely things that can be helped by having a robust strength and conditioning program. Definitely looking at sort of calf strength, stability through the foot and ankle, stability on a single leg, so a lot of single leg strength work, just a very good general conditioning program will definitely help you avoid the sort of common injuries for steeplechase. I think, you know, that is why me as an athlete, I got away with doing a steeplechase with perhaps not great technique, was because I was had a career as a 1500 meter runner, and I was really strong in the gym. So I think that really helped me be a half decent steeplechaser without actually having the sort of years and years of technical work that most steeplechasers have had. Thanks, Paul. Hope that answers your question. Is there any benefit for young developing athletes to compete in 300-400 hurdle races? Yeah, sure. I think, you know, if you can learn how to run fast over hurdles, that's and it gives you the technical knowledge of how to run over a hurdle well. I think that's something I would say is a great thing to do. It's not something that I did because obviously I didn't compete in steeplechase as a young athlete. But yeah, I think if you can run well over a shorter distance, you're working on your speed, which is definitely something that's important in the steeplechase, and you're getting your technique honed, which will surely help you as you develop into a senior athlete. I think we'll go on to the next slide now, if that's okay. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. Right. So this should hopefully bring up a few other questions. So this was the next thing from the video. So it talked about taking off both legs. So why would we want our athletes to take off on both legs? Obviously, if you're attacking a barrier or approaching a barrier in a group, something might happen that will knock you off your stride. So having that ability to just hurdle with whatever leg you get to the hurdle with is definitely a bonus. Repetition training to include an aspect of hurdle practice all year round is something we've just mentioned, and ingraining the technique and giving confidence to the athlete. So I think just the only way you're going to learn to take off both legs is by practicing, and that is from doing hurdle drills practicing on both legs with all your drills, practicing on both legs when you're doing hurdles, moving the hurdles around a little bit to get athletes to not get used to sort of a certain number of steps. You sort of got to surprise them and make them sort of have to change legs. Like I've said on the text there, the athlete is very likely to have a favoured lead leg and is likely to have the ability to adjust their stride pattern going into a barrier to use that favoured leg. But it is very useful to have the ability to use both legs and be able to hurdle well with that. So if we go back to questions now, and if anybody's also got any tips on this, feel free to write that in the question box and we can put that up on the screen as well. Hi. At what stage of development would you go all in for the chase? I.e., do you start early racing 1500 steeplechase or come in later in the age groups? I think it's great to have. I think it's definitely an advantage to have tried steeplechase as early as possible. It gives you a feeling of what's expected in the event. I think coming in later is definitely possible. But why not? Why not give it a try? Because I feel like this is the thing when we're doing our workshops and this community of steeplechasers and steeplechase coaches, there aren't many of us. And I think it's one of the things that we have problems with is that people are nervous. They're nervous of trying the event, or they get to do the event at an event, something like a league match, and they're thrown in either in a competition where they're maybe out of their depth or they're on their own. So it's not always a great introduction. So doing it in the younger age groups where there might be more opportunities to race, you can maybe an athlete might get an opportunity to compete at something at schools level in the steeplechase. I think that would be definitely an advantage. In terms of going all in, I think it's great to have variety and let the athlete sort of come to their own decision on what event they want to focus on. But I definitely think we have to, as coaches, give it as an option. And I think that sometimes isn't the case. The athlete, it's sort of a last resort, unfortunately. And I think if we had it as an option, it's like, you know, are you going to be an 800 meter runner, a 1500 meter runner, a steeplechaser, or a 5K runner? You know, this needs to be an option for the athletes. And if we have more coaches who are confident to set some steeplechase training, then I think that would happen. So I hope I answered your question, Andrew. Some runners may not be suited to steeplechase. Do England athletics ever approach athletes who may be suited to steeplechase? It's not something we actively do, but I certainly myself would say to an athlete, have you thought about trying the steeplechase? There's definitely athletes that you see out there, especially sort of older athletes, that you would think, because they maybe show good potential over cross country, where they're having, you know, good at running sort of different rhythms on a cross country race and have good strength. They might be a good 1500 runner, they might be a good 3K runner or 5K runner, and they're strong and robust. Then they obviously fit the profile of a good steeplechaser. Yeah, some runners wouldn't be suited to it. For many reasons, maybe they don't fancy it, and I think that's one of the big things with steeplechasers. You've got to buy into it. They might not fancy it, and they might not be suited. They might not be robust enough. They might not have that sort of natural rhythm that is required and that endurance that's needed especially when you're a senior athlete over the 3K. So I hope that answers your question, Paul. Advice for athletes that can only land 2-footed in the water jump, mental or drills? Hi, Kyle. I'd say my advice is try not to land 2-footed. It's very difficult. It could be a bit of both. And I think the only way to get over it is practicing. I myself, when I started the steeplechase, my first race, I landed each water jump like a squat. And I can tell you now that was way more tiring and fatiguing than if I landed on one foot. And that was just because I hadn't really practiced it enough. I went away, practiced the water jump. The next race, I knocked 15 seconds off. Went away, practiced the water jump. The next race, I knocked it off again. So not only, you know, I think we need to tell the athletes like that if we practice it and get it right, we're going to knock absolute seconds off our times. It is mental as well. So I think and this applies to hurdling and the water jump, it is quite scary. It can be quite scary for the athlete, especially if in training they've had a few bad experiences or maybe landed in the water. But as a steeplechaser, you're going to land in the water sometimes, you're going to fall. So I think it's just a case of getting confident, being mentally strong. So having some tools that you can fall back on if you do have a bad water jump and land 2-footed, like something, you know, have some things that you can sort of think back to during the race and just try and get it right on the next one. And definitely just being strong enough to land on one foot is a massive thing. It is technique, and I think that is something in the workshops that we've done. We've done quite a lot of workshops where we've actually managed to get water jump filled up and practiced it. And I think when we gather athletes, that's the biggest thing, is they don't often have that opportunity to practice the water jump because their track doesn't allow them to fill the water pit up. So I think finding somewhere that's, you know, happy to fill the water jump up and booking that on a regular basis for training is definitely advisable. Thanks, Kyle. Hope that answers your question. My view is that not everyone is for steeplechase. What do you think? What kind of physical and mental characteristics one needs to have to be successful? So again, I think you need to be a really good all-round endurance runner. You need to be a good 800, 1500 and longer. So 3K, 5K, depending on what age group you are. You need to have strength, you need to be robust, you need to have speed. So it's definitely a very, very physical event. And I think there's some athletes you could definitely point towards the steeplechase because of their physical prowess. Mental characteristics, I think definitely someone who's not afraid. I think it's the same in any athletic event. You have to be a good racer. And in the steeplechase, I think it's almost you against the barrier in a lot of races because they do get quite split up, especially at sort of regional level. You might be, if you're one of the strongest in the field, you could be running on your own quite a lot. So you do need to be quite mentally quite tough and know how to run your splits well. At a more competitive level, so maybe once you get to a sort of national competition where there's more people around you, then it becomes a little bit more tactical, and then you have to decide how you're going to run that race. But I would say quite a lot of my steeplechase races as an athlete was me against the barrier. So hope that answers your question. Hi, Steve. Do you feel that the proposed height change of hurdles from 84 to 84 centimetres for under 17 boys will help encourage more athletes to have a go? Thanks, Steve. Yeah, this has been something I've emailed with a lot of people about this year. And yes, I do think it's potentially going to be good because it's going to be maybe make some people less afraid to give it a go. It's obviously caused a bit of controversy, so because it's a completely different height than we've had, it's not the same as the female height. So obviously in terms of having the equipment at a track at each facility is going to be something that's brought in over time. But yeah, I do think that it's been brought in for a reason, and that is because we want to get people to try the event. So not sure if everybody agrees with that, but that's what I think. Okay. Let me just quickly go on to the next slide then, Spencer. And this is the last slide anyway. So this is the end of the video that we watched. So looking for forward movement was something that was highlighted. So what does this mean? So we're looking for the athlete to keep close to the barrier rather than sort of flying over and wasting time in the air and landing on the barrier and running off quickly. So looking at efficiently not collapsing as you land from each hurdle. So what can we do to improve this? Obviously practicing hurdles. Using soft hurdles is a good idea so that you can avoid injury risk, and progressively raising the hurdle height so you're still trying to get the athlete to not clear the barrier too high. So using hurdles is something I would definitely suggest. It gives you a lot more confidence. You can knock them over and you're not going to hurt yourself. So improving coordination by using rhythm drills are definitely something that will help you efficiently hurdle the barrier better. And then, as we've already said, conditioning. The other thing I would suggest is using video analysis. A lot of athletes if they don't see what they're doing, they won't be able to apply it to their body. So having that feedback after doing some hurdle drills or some hurdle practice, I think is really, really useful in the training environment. I'm sure most people will do that, but yeah, that's definitely something that I think would help. So if there's any final questions, Spencer, before we finish off. Some of our best steeplechasers before, including Spencer, were great road runners and cross-country runners. Would you recommend road and cross-country races in winter and spring? Yeah, definitely. I think, being able to run on different surfaces, especially cross-country, I feel that was a good grounding for me. Going into steeplechase and other steeplechases that I can think of, such as Hattie Dean. She was a fantastic cross-country runner and very, very good at sort of changing her rhythm. So I do think that really helped her in the steeplechase. And definitely just being able to sort of crack out a good road race and get some good flat times under your belt is definitely something that I would recommend for winter and spring, because why not? You know, you're getting some feedback, you're getting some information about how your training's going as well. So it gives you, otherwise it's a really long year if you're not going to run on the flat indoors, and you're not going to run on the cross country or road. It's a long time to not race for. Thanks, Paul. Is there any other questions? Thanks, Spencer. So yeah, that's gone so quick. I got into my rhythm eventually. Pardon the pun. I was quite nervous to set off, but hopefully I got into my spiel quite quickly. But yeah, if you let us know of anything else that you would like webinars on, and we can all meet again and discuss the steeplechase. Thanks very much for joining us, and take care.